Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, Algeria has decided to make an exceptional financial contribution of $15 million to the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA. The Commissioner General of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, has warned that dismantling the agency would accelerate famine in Gaza and condemn a generation of children to despair. The participants in the fifth session of the Diplomatic Forum of Solidarity with the Sahrawi people have called on the UN Security Council to relaunch the peace process without delay and put an end to the obstacles erected by the Moroccan occupation. Hello and welcome on Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Semeni. The President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Minister of National Defense, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has chaired a meeting of the High Security Council that was announced in a press release issued by the Presidency of the Republic. In an address to the UN Security Council meeting on UNRWA, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has announced in New York that Algeria, on the decision of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has decided to make an exceptional financial contribution to $15 million to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, in addition to the previous contributions granted directly by Algeria to the Palestinian Authority. He said that Algeria believes that this initiative is a genuine duty and an acceptable commitment incumbent on us and other members of the international community.
ومن جانبها وبقرار من رئيس الجمهورية
Under the instruction of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, Algeria announces the granting of an exceptional financial contribution worth $15 million for the benefit of UNRWA. This is an exceptional financial contribution that comes on top of Algeria's other contributions, which are provided directly to the Palestinian Authority. We believe that we are truly duty-bound. There is a responsibility on our shoulder and that of the other members of the international community. We are still convinced that UNRWA should continue to exist as long as there are Palestinian refugees.
That was the Minister Ahmed Attaf, who said that the initiative is a genuine duty and inescapable commitment. On the sidelines of the UN session, Mr. Attaf held a bilateral meeting with the special envoy of the Palestinian president and member of the Central Committee of the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, Mr. Ziad Abu Amr. During this meeting, the two parties discussed the latest developments in the Palestinian issue, especially those related to the full membership of the State of Palestine in the United Nations and the conditions for reviving the peace process in the Middle East, in addition to the post-war Gaza governance project. The Algerian diplomacy chief also met with the United Nations Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Mr. Tor Wensland, during which the two parties stressed the necessity of speeding up the provision of the necessary conditions to revive the peace process in accordance with the resolutions of international legitimacy that guarantee and preserve the historical right of the Palestinian people to establish their independent state with Al-Quds as its capital. Finally, the Minister of Foreign Affairs held bilateral talks with the Commissioner General of UNRWA, Mr. Philippe Lazzarini, where the two men renewed Algeria's continued support for this agency and its indispensable role in supporting Palestinian refugees, especially in light of the current Israeli genocidal war and ethnic cleansing against the Palestinian people. Mr. Lazzarini has warned that dismantling the agency in the midst of the turmoil would risk accelerate famine in Gaza and condemn a generation of children to despair, fueling endless cycles of violence. Mohammed Khatal reports.
The Commissioner General of UNRWA, Filippo Lazzarini, has reiterated that since its creation by the UN General Assembly in 1949, UNRWA has always been the backbone of humanitarian operations in Gaza, denouncing on the occasion an insidious campaign by the Zionist entity to put an end to its operations. Mr. Lazzarini called for the opening of an independent investigation to look into the crimes committed by the occupation army against UNRWA members and facilities in the Gaza Strip.
In Gaza, the government of Israel seeks to end UNRWA's activities. The agency's requests to deliver aid to the north are repeatedly denied. UNRWA premises and staff have been targeted since the beginning of the war. 178 UNRWA personnel have been killed. Our headquarters has been occupied militarily, and allegations have emerged concerning the existence of tunnels under our premises. UNRWA personnel detained by Israeli security forces have shared harrowing accounts of mistreatment and torture in detention. We demand an independent investigation and accountability for the blatant disregard for the protected status of humanitarian workers, operations and facilities under international law.
Famine is already threatening the north of the Palestinian territory, where almost 34,000 people, most of them civilians, have been killed since the beginning of the Zionist aggression, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. Dismantling UNRWA will have lasting repercussions, he warned. It will worsen the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and accelerate the arrival of famine, he noted.
Dismantling UNRWA will have lasting repercussions. In the short term, it will deepen the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and accelerate the onset of famine. In the longer term, it will jeopardize the transition from ceasefire to day after by depriving a traumatized population of essential services. It will make nearly impossible the formidable task of bringing 500,000 deeply distressed girls and boys back to learning. Failing to deliver on education will condemn an entire generation to despair, fueling anger, resentment, and endless cycles of violence.
Lazzarini also paid tribute to the 178 UNRWA employees killed in Gaza by observing a minute of silence with all the members of the Council for all the humanitarian workers killed since the beginning of the Zionist aggression.
Speaking to reporters following the UN Security Council meeting on UNRWA, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan, Ayman Safadi, urged international donors to help funding UNRWA, which he described as irreplaceable in supporting Palestinian refugees.
Our message is very direct and very simple. UNRWA is indispensable. It is irreplaceable. Nobody can do the job that UNRWA does in terms of navigating through the catastrophe that the Israeli aggression has forced on Gaza. People are dying, and more will die because UNRWA is simply not being allowed to do its job and help starved Palestinians. We want to urge all our partners to continue to support UNRWA, to provide it with the funding it needs so that it can provide life-saving assistance to Palestinians in Gaza, and beyond that to continue to support Palestinian refugees in its 5 areas of operation. Long before October 7, UNRWA has been the target of a political assassination campaign by an Israeli government that wants to do so in order to kill the Palestinian refugees issue. That's something that we will not allow to happen, and it will not happen.
Now, the Arab Interparliamentary Union has urged international human rights organizations and all parties concerned to assume their responsibilities in denouncing the grave and continuing abuses committed against Palestine or Palestinian prisoners who are being subjected to the most horrible forms of torture in the jails of the Zionist occupation. In a press release issued on the occasion of Palestine or Palestinian Prisoners' Day, celebrated on the 17th of April each year, signed by its president, APN chairman Brahim Boughali, the organization indicated that recording the crimes of the Zionist occupation is no longer enough, and it is now imperative to take action to bring those responsible for these crimes to an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and bring them to justice warning against the continued acts of genocide and starvation against the Palestinians. The UN Security Council is holding its quarterly open debate at ministerial level on the situation in Palestine. The Maltese Minister for Foreign Affairs, Ian Borg, will chair this meeting, which is one of the highlights of the Maltese presidency in April. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is expected to make a presentation. In the wake of the massive genocidal aggressions carried out by the occupation forces against the Gaza Strip for more than 6 months, at least 33,970 Palestinians have been killed. Vast areas of Gaza and an estimated 1.7 million people have been displaced in the Palestinian enclave, most of them several times. At today's meeting, the head of the UN and the members of the Council are expected to express their alarm at the disastrous humanitarian situation and the scale of destruction in Gaza. Several participants are likely to deplore the disregard for international humanitarian law, condemn all attacks on civilians, including humanitarian workers, and call for those responsible to be held accountable. Members will also raise the issue of the high levels of acute food insecurity faced by the Palestinian population and the growing risk of famine, and stress the need for the United Nations and humanitarian organizations to gain safe access to all people in need. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, has launched a flash appeal for $822 billion for the occupied Palestinian territory. The money will be used to provide assistance to 3.1 million people in Gaza and in the West Bank, including East Al-Quds, until the end of the year. The artillery of the Zionist occupation shelled at dawn today the southern, southwestern and eastern parts of the city of Gaza on the 198th day of the barbaric Israeli aggression against the besieged Palestinian enclave. Local sources reported that the occupation artillery launched intense bombardments of areas in the south, southwest and east of Gaza City, particularly the areas of Sheikh Ajlin, Al-Hawa and Zaytun, which injured a number of Palestinian citizens. Now to other news. Speaking from New York on Wednesday, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, stressed the need to adopt a collective approach that meets the aspirations of young people in the Mediterranean, an approach that Algeria is calling for to be defined in line with a renewed vision that responds to fundamental requirements that are urgent priorities. Attaf said that the region has not been spared the crises, conflicts and tensions raging in other regions, which are jeopardizing the achievement of the peace, security, development, or tranquility and peaceful coexistence to which their peoples aspire. The foreign minister also pointed out that the Mediterranean basin, home to some of the greatest civilizations in the history of mankind, is today exposed to the impact of countless cross-border scourges such as the threat of terrorism, violent extremism and organized crime.
فإن الحوض المتوسط الذي يمثل ملتقى أعظم.
The Mediterranean basin, which is the crossroads of the greatest civilizations in human history, has now become subject to many cross-border problems, and those are manifest in terrorist threat and related crime, be it organized crime or violent crime, not to mention the increased threat posed by climate change that has become part of the daily life and can no longer be hidden or denied. These developments place the youth of the Mediterranean at the heart of the current problems. On the one hand, they are the greatest victims of the security-related challenges, but on the other hand, they are also an important key to resolving these challenges.
Here in Algiers, the chairman of the NATO Military Committee, Rob Bauer, was received by the Secretary General of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, Younes Magraman, as part of his visit to Algeria. In a statement to the newsmen following his meeting with Mr. Magraman, Mr. Bauer said his visit to Algeria was as part of boosting partnership relations, expressing satisfaction about the already existing relations between the two sides.
I'm here in Algeria on invitation of the government of Algeria because of a long-standing partnership that Algeria has with NATO. So I'm here to reconfirm that commitment from our side, to talk to the authorities both on the political and the military side, to hear how we can improve, what we can do more, and if there is a request to do more from Algeria's side, then at least we will look into that, and then the nations, all the nations together, decide what we will do if there is another request from the Algerian government. But so far I'm extremely pleased with the way the cooperation is going, and I think it's great. I've been welcomed greatly by the people when I arrived today. And I'm looking forward to the great hospitality of this beautiful nation.
Regarding the NATO partnerships, in the framework of the Mediterranean dialogue, the chairman of the NATO Military Committee said that NATO takes into consideration the requirements of every country as they differ from one country to another.
So, first and foremost, all the partners NATO works with is based on the requirements from those partners. So it starts with an operational requirement or a political requirement from a partner nation, and then we look into it, and then the nations decide together whether or not we're gonna do that, based on, of course, the availability of money, availability of capacity in the armed forces, if it's about training, for example. So it starts with that. And there is different speeds, so to say, because of the differences of the requirements in the nation. So it's not one size fits all in the Mediterranean dialogue. We have one-on-one agreements as NATO with all these nations. Given the requirements of Algeria, we are now looking into energy security, into cybersecurity, and into countering terrorism. So those are areas where we work together with Algeria, and we will continue to do so, based again on the requirements of the government of Algeria. If there is a wish, a requirement of the government of Algeria to do more, we can always look into that, and NATO is willing to then help, in this particular case, Algeria more than we do now.
The Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Younes Magraman, has received the Deputy Minister for Climate Change at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea, Hoyan Kim. Now, the Minister of Finance, Laziz Faid, has attended a meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors of the G24, as well as meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors of the MENA region with the managing director of the International Monetary Fund as part of the spring meetings of the IMF and the World Bank Group, which are being held from the 15th to the 21st April in Washington. The details with Said Bouazi.
At the meeting of the Intergovernmental Group of 24, Laziz Faid underlined the urgent need to strengthen the capacities of member countries, as well as the importance of the technical support provided by the World Bank and the IMF. He emphasized the essential role of this support in helping the countries of the group to draw up relevant economic policies capable of meeting the many challenges they face, said a statement from the Ministry of Finance. With this in mind, the Finance Minister called for an increase in the financial resources available and more appropriate technical assistance in order to promote tangible progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. With regard to the ongoing discussions on the reform of the Bretton Woods institutions and strengthening their capacity to intervene, the Finance Minister encouraged participants to examine all the options recommended in the framework of the capital adequacy of multilateral development banks. He stressed the importance of optimizing balance sheets, promoting commitment of the World Bank Group to financing the fight against climate change, and to promoting partnerships with other multilateral development banks to strengthen this support. At the meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors of the MENA region, with Mrs. Kristalina Georgieva, managing director of the IMF, discussions focused on the challenges imposed by climate change as well as the ongoing geopolitical crises, notably the war on Gaza and its negative impact on the region's economic growth. On a bilateral level, Aziz Faïd held talks with Mrs. Feriel Werg, Tunisian Minister of the Economy and Planning, to exchange views on cooperation between the two countries. The discussions tackled various areas of potential collaboration. In addition, the finance minister held a meeting with Sergio Pimenta, regional vice president for Africa at the International Finance Corporation IFC. He also had a fruitful meeting with Jihad Azur, director of the IMF's Middle East and Central Asia Department.
The participants in the fifth session of the Diplomatic Forum of Solidarity with the Sahrawi People have reaffirmed their unwavering support for the Sahrawi people's struggle to exercise their right to self-determination and independence, calling on the UN Security Council to relaunch the peace process without delay and to put an end to the obstacles erected by the Moroccan occupation. Mohammed Khadil.
In a final communique issued at the end of the forum held on Wednesday at the embassy of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic in Algiers, the participants launched an urgent appeal to the UN Secretary General and the Security Council to relaunch the peace process without delay in order to guarantee the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination, pointing out the imperative need to put an end to the political blockade and the obstacles put up by the Moroccan regime to perpetuate the conflict in Africa's last colony and impose illusory solutions that contradict the nature and legal framework of the conflict. The participants also reminded Spain that it cannot continue to evade its international commitments as the administrative power of Western Sahara, calling on it to fully assume its historical, legal, political and moral responsibilities to put an end to the colonization of Western Sahara in order to avoid the escalation of tensions that could jeopardize the chances of a political settlement of the conflict and aggravate instability in the region. The forum also urged all countries in the world and both the Republic and private sectors to refrain from financing any projects in the occupied Sahrawi territories, as this would constitute a blatant violation of international law, while denouncing the repressive practices and human rights violations by the Moroccan occupier against defenseless Sahrawi civilians in the occupied territories of Western Sahara. The international community, the participants added, must act for the immediate release of all Sahrawi political prisoners held in Moroccan jails, affirming the need to extend the mandate of the United Nations mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO, to include the protection of human rights and the immediate cessation of the systematic plundering of Western Sahara's natural resources.
This is Radio Algeria International. On the occasion of the celebration of World Heritage Day, we invite you to listen to a program on Al Qasbah, located here in Algiers.